So now we're going to switch over to talking about mortgages. And a mortgage is different from a credit card, which is a kind of revolving credit, and that is credit that has a minimum payment. However, the payment does not necessarily have to be large enough to pay off the loan within a certain specified period of time. But a mortgage is an installment loan. And in an installment loan, payments are made so that the loan balance is $0 after a certain amount of time, and that's called the term of the loan. So you may have a term of 20 years or 30 years, etc. And after that term, then the balance will be 0 because the payments will have been sufficient to make it go down to 0. Now, a mortgage is a special kind of loan that is secured by the collateral of real estate. So when you get a mortgage on a house, that house is the collateral for the loan, and if you don't pay the loan back, then they can take the house from you. When purchasing a home, you very often have to pay a down payment, and this is an amount that has to be paid up front, and the amount that you have to pay up front will depend on the loan that you're getting. In a fixed rate mortgage, you have an interest rate that's given to you at the time that the mortgage is taken out, and that rate stays the same for the entire term of the loan. So if it's a 30-year mortgage, the interest rate would stay the same throughout that 30 years of the mortgage. However, there are also adjustable rate mortgages, also known as variable rate mortgages or ARMs, and the interest rate here can change after a certain amount of time. So you may have a 5-year fixed rate of a certain amount, and then after 5 years it may adjust. Points on a mortgage are also known as discount points, and this is basically just prepaid interest to the bank. For each point you pay, the interest rate on the loan can be reduced by 1/8%. So basically you're paying more cash up front to get a lower interest rate over time, which does save you a lot of money in interest. Whenever you take out a mortgage, the federal government requires that the lender give you a truth in lending disclosure statement. And that's a document that discloses all of the details of the mortgage, including the rate that you're getting and the interest that's going to be charged over the life of the loan. In addition to paying back principal of the loan and interest each month, very often the lender will require that you have an escrow account. And this is a separate account where monies for insurance and taxes are deposited each month so that when those items come due each year, there's sufficient money to pay them. So this is an amount that's added to your monthly payment every single month, held by the bank, and then the bank actually pays the insurance and the taxes for you. When you spread a loan out over a number of years, this is called amortizing the loan, and you get an amortization schedule, which is a breakdown of the principal and interest paid on a loan by the month. It can be by the year, but typically you can also have it broken down month by month. So as we mentioned before, when you buy a home, very often a down payment is required. This can depend on the loan program. You may be able to find a loan with 0% down. These are not as common as they used to be. And you may have to put down as much as 20%. Of course, you can put down more, but many loans require that you put down 20%. If you're going to calculate your down payment, all you do is you take the percent of the down payment, convert it to a decimal by moving the decimal 2 places to the left, and multiplying it by the price of the home. Then this down payment reduces the amount that you have to borrow to purchase the home because you pay that amount up front. So here's an example of a down payment. Let's find the amount of a down payment and the amount to be borrowed for a home. The home sells for $124,900, and if the rate of the down payment is 15%. So we're going to find the down payment and the amount you have to borrow or mortgage. So the down payment amount is the price of the home times the percent changed to a decimal. So 15% has the decimal at the end, and you move that decimal back 2 places to the left, and it becomes 0.15. If you do that multiplication, you come up with a down payment of $18,375. Because this is going to be paid up front, the amount you must borrow will be reduced by $18,375 to come up with a total of $106,525 that you have to mortgage or borrow in order to purchase the home. So to find a down payment, take the percent, change it to a decimal, and multiply. Once you've found the down payment, subtract it from the cost of the home. And that's going to give you the amount of money that you're going to need to borrow in order to pay the full $124,900 for the house. Now, when you buy a home, you're going to be quoted an APR, or an annual percentage rate. And this is going to be the cost that's charged for borrowing the money each year. And that is, the interest is the amount that you have to pay for borrowing the money. As mentioned before, you may be allowed to purchase points, and this is an additional fee that you pay to the bank to achieve a lower APR. It's given as a percent, and you multiply just as we did for down payment to find the amount of the points. It does not reduce the amount of the loan, however. This is simply an amount you pay up front in order to be granted a certain interest rate. This amount does not reduce the amount of the loan, however. This is simply an amount you pay up front in prepaid interest in order to get a lower interest rate over the life of the loan. Now let's talk about how to compute your monthly payment. This is the formula for computing the monthly payment on an installment loan. Now this will work for a car loan as well as a home loan. So any installment loan where you make regular payments so that the balance at the end of the time is 0. PMT stands for payment. P is the principal, which is the amount you must borrow. R is the interest rate, which will be given as an annual rate. N is the number of payments that you pay each year, and this is usually 12 in the case of a mortgage because you pay your mortgage payment every month. T is the term of the loan in years, and of course this can vary. It's usually going to be 15, 20, or 30, and in most cases it's going to be 30. So here's our example for buying a home. Here's a home located at 715 Adams Farm Court in Lawrenceville, Georgia, and it is for sale for $140,000. Now, for the purposes of this example, we're going to assume that we're paying full price for this home. So we're going to assume that we're paying the full $140,000 for the house. Although, as you know, in real estate, everything is negotiable. And so for this home, we're going to make a 20% down payment. We're going to get a 6.25% APR. If we pay 1 discount point, that is 1% of the loan up front. So these are the things we have to find: the amount of the down payment, the amount of the mortgage, the points to be paid, the monthly payment, the cost of interest over the life of the loan. So if we keep this loan for 30 years, how much does it cost us? Let's start with the down payment. We take the price of our home, we take our percentage, and we convert our percent. That is, we convert the 20% to a decimal. 20% as a decimal is 0.20. Then we multiply to get a down payment of $28,000. So $140,000 times 20% or times 0.20 is $28,000. Now, the amount of the mortgage is going to be reduced by the down payment. So that's the original price that we're willing to pay, $140,000, reduced by or subtract $28,000. So the loan or the mortgage amount is $112,000. So in order to get the interest rate that we were quoted of 6.25, the lender, the bank that is requiring that we pay 1 point. A discount point is 1% of the loan. Our loan is $112,000, so we multiply that by 1%, 0.01, and this is an additional amount in addition to the down payment that we must give the lender in advance to get this loan. It does not reduce the amount that we borrow, however, like the down payment does. Now we have to use the formula to calculate the monthly payment. And notice all the different things that are in this formula. P is the principal. The principal is the amount we borrow. So our principal in this case is $112,000. That was the amount after the down payment that we needed to borrow. Our rate was quoted as 6.25%. Well, that has to be changed over to a decimal by moving this 2 places to the left. So that's 0.0625. That's where this number comes from, 0.0625. That's our rate. Now, our N is the number of payments we make in a year, and we're going to make monthly payments, so that's 12. So that's where this denominator of 12 comes from. And then we've got some repeated things in the denominator. And then we've got this rate and this N. The R and the N are repeated in the denominator. In the formula, 1 subtract, in parentheses, 1 plus 0.0625, our rate as a decimal, divided by 12, is raised to the negative NT, where T is the number of years of the loan, which is 30. So it's important that you recognize where each number comes from in the formula. And there's one other very important thing to remember. If you're going to type this in the calculator, you've got to type it exactly as I've shown it here, with these brackets or another set of parentheses here and parentheses around this exponent. Now my preference is to do this in parts, so I'm going to show you that I did the numerator first, and you can type it in the calculator just like you see here. 112,000 parentheses 0.0625 divided by 12 close parentheses equals, and you'll get 583.333333 repeated. Now, in order to get these answers accurate to the nearest penny, you do need to take it about 9 decimal places. So I would write down every decimal place that the calculator actually shows. Now you can do the denominator the same way, and if you're doing it separately and you've gotten the number for the numerator already, you don't have to put the outer brackets around this number. You can just start with a 1. 1 subtract, you must put the parentheses, 1 plus 0.0625 divided by 12, close parentheses. Use the caret key for the exponent, raise to, and then put this in parentheses or put negative 360. If you do not put this in parentheses, it's going to raise it to negative 12, get an answer, and then multiply by 30, which is not our intent here. Our intent is to raise the entire base here to negative 360. So do one of two things. Either put parentheses around negative 12 times 30, or just go ahead and do this arithmetic and get negative 360. When you do that, you'll get this value to 8 decimal places, 0.856975272. When you divide that to the nearest penny, you will get $680.69. And typically when you have a house payment, that is the way that you're going to pay it. It's going to be to the nearest penny. It's not going to be rounded. However, some of the exercises that you're completing may actually ask you to do some rounding. And so if you're required to round to the nearest dollar, you would get $681 here. And as long as you carry these decimal places out far enough, you'll get this to the nearest dollar accurately. So here's our monthly payment. This is what it would take to pay off this mortgage of $112,000 over 30 years, $681 every single month. Now we need to calculate how much this loan actually costs us. How much interest do we pay? Because remember, we only borrowed $112,000. But we're paying $681 360 times. Because that's $681, 12 times a year for 30 years. So that's where the 360 comes from. You've got to pay 12 payments a year for 30 years, and that comes out to be 360 total payments. If you multiply that out, you get $245,160 paid in payments. Now that's not all interest because we borrowed $112,000. Remember, the house cost $112,000. So the difference between the total of the payments and the amount borrowed is interest. We pay more in interest than we paid for the house itself. And that is the cost of borrowing the bank's money over a 30-year period. And it is not uncommon at all for the interest to be more than the actual house itself. So let's look at options for financing and see if we can save some money. Our first option here for a home of $180,000 with a 15% down payment is a 15-year fixed mortgage with a 6% annual percentage rate, or a 30-year fixed mortgage with a 7% interest rate. And it's very common that the interest rate will be higher the longer you keep the loan. So in order to comparison shop these, we're going to calculate the interest for each option and determine how much we can save with option A. Now, option A is going to be cheaper for two reasons. One is we don't keep the money as long, and the other is that the interest rate is lower. But how much do you save? How much is the difference in the payment? Can you actually manage the 15-year mortgage? So in either case, we've got to borrow 85%. So I'm doing the down payment slightly different this time. instead of calculating by multiplying by 15%, I'm going straight to the loan amount by multiplying by 85%, because if you have 100% and you take away the down payment of 15%, that means you have to borrow 85%. Now, you'll get the same answer if you do it the other way, and that is if you multiply by 15% and then subtract. In either case, we're going to get $153,000 for the loan amount. So in the first case, I multiplied by 0.85. I went straight to the loan amount. To find my down payment, I subtracted how much I was going to borrow from the 180, and I got the $27,000 as the down payment. You can also go ahead and do it the way we did before, multiply by 15%, get the down payment, subtract the down payment from the price of the home, and you'll get the loan amount of $153,000. So in either case, we've got a loan of $153,000 here. One is going to be at 15 years, 6%. The other is going to be at 30 years, 7%. So we've got to calculate the payment. In order to compare these two things, we have to calculate the payment for each one. So filling in for the first one, 6% is changed to 0.06. 12 months is in both denominators. Amount borrowed, 153. And this is 15 years, so our exponent is negative 12 times 15. And notice again, I put the whole thing in parentheses. For our second option, very, very similar. I'm going to borrow 153, but our rate is 7%, and our length of the loan is 30 years instead of 15. Everything else is the same. Change the rate, change the term, the number of years. Multiplying out, I did the numerator first for each one. And in this case, I decided to break it down a little bit and just do what's inside the parentheses. So I got 1.005 for inside the parentheses here, and negative 180 for the parentheses. And here I went to 9 decimal places for the 1.07 divided by 12, and then I got negative 360. Sometimes this is helpful if you do it this way on your calculator instead of trying to do it all in one piece. So that gets me a denominator, and you can just enter 1 minus 1.005, caret key, negative 180, and go out to 9 places. So in the first case, the 15-year, the denominator is 0.592517573. And in the 30-year, it's 0.8767943132. So this first payment rounded to the nearest dollar, although, as we said before, in real life, you're probably going to have to pay to the nearest penny. But for these purposes, we round to the nearest dollar, $1,291. And our second payment is almost $300 lower, $1,018. And this is the reason why a person would choose to go with a longer term loan, because the monthly payment is significantly lower. However, what you're going to find out is the cost of having that lower monthly payment is pretty significant. So if we look at each of these over the life of the loan, 15 years paying $1,291, 30 years paying $1,018. Now, a 15-year loan would be 12 months times 15 years. That's 180 total payments. So that's where the 180 comes from. And the 30-year would be 12 months times 30 years, or 360 payments. So that's where this 360 comes from. So look at the total of the payments. For the first option, $232,380. For the second option, $366,480. So for option A, the cost of the interest is $79,380. That is, if you stay in the home for 15 years, you have to pay almost $80,000 in interest. The second loan, however, you pay over $200,000 in interest, because in each case, you take the total of the payments and you subtract the loan amount. So you save $134,000 over the life of the loan if you can make the difference in the payment. So if you can come up with the $1,291 versus just $1,018, you can save over $134,000, almost the price of the home.